Mitch with DrywallInstruction.com. I'm going to do a quick segment on what's in my pouch for hanging. Let's take a look. Let's start with the utility knife. The utility knife is probably the most critical tool that's in there. This is a non-retractable one. They come in retractable or non-retractable. I like it to be fast, and so I use a non-retractable one. You do want to be careful because when you put it in your pouch, you want to know where it is, so when you put your hand in your pouch, you don't cut yourself. Drywall, the blades are sharp. You want to keep them sharp all the time. Drywall's a cool product. It scores with a sharp utility knife. You pop it, you cut the back side, and you've got your sheetrock cut. And so your utility knife is one of your most important tools. And again, I would suggest keeping a sharp blade in there. It just makes everything go faster and your cut's cleaner and makes it work good. The next thing would be just a normal tape measure, obviously, to make your measurements with. Next after that would be a drywall rasp. A drywall rasp is like a file type tool. They call them Drywall Rasp or Sureform. Sureform was one of the earlier manufacturers. This is a little different model than that. The Drywall Rasp is an important tool because when you have a cut that's not necessarily clean, it's a little bit rough. Sometimes your piece just doesn't quite fit. You need it to fit. You can take a rasp and rasp that cut, that edge, and take it down. And it's a very aggressive tool. You can kind of see by the picture. But if you press hard on it, it'll take more off. It's a really handy tool. So that's a drywall rasp. Next would be the drywall hammer. Drywall hammer looks a little bit like a hatchet. It originally was a plasterer's tool, and they used the hatchet blade for the lath and plaster. The lath and lath and plaster is a wood strip that's about 2 inches by about 1/4 inch. In size, and they would take their hatchet blade and cut their wood lath to length, and so that's why it looks like it does. The drywall hammer has a little notch in it for pulling out nails. It is used, some people use the blade for carrying sheetrock, hooking it underneath. You can also use it as a wedge you need to slide your sheetrock in and get it to move one way or another, or lift it up from underneath. So that's the drywall hammer. It has a hammer head on it that's rounded and kind of waffled, and that rounded hammer head is the way it is so that when you set a drywall nail, it creates a little dimple that your mud will fill up to cover your nails. And so that's what the head of the hammer looks like. So that's your drywall hammer. Next we have what we have called a keyhole saw. A keyhole saw is a cool little tool, very sharp, very handy to cut sheetrock with. They make them a little more aggressive than they used to even. They have kind of, as you can see in the picture, it's kind of a pretty aggressive little blade. You have to be careful because they'll cut a lot of stuff. They'll cut through wood and some different stuff as well. So mainly you want to be careful when you're cutting. If you're cutting into a wall, make sure that you don't have electrical wires behind it, phone lines, that type of a thing. But it's a real handy tool, very sharp. Cuts fast. A lot of times you'll use this in a location that you can't use a drywall router if you're cutting some bad damaged sheetrock out or that type of a thing, and you can't have a lot of dust in a house. These work great. Also, you can use them for cutting out electrical outlets or that type of a thing if you don't have a drywall router. Next would be a chalk line, simple chalk line. Chalk lines are handy because you have situations when you're doing sheetrock where you have an angle to cut, and if you'll take your utility knife and you'll make a notch where you measure your angle where you need to make it cut, you can take your chalk line, run it across there, and snap it, and you have a nice line to make your cut with. Once you have your line on there, you can take your utility knife and go ahead and make your cut, and you have your angle cut. So don't worry about the chalk. The chalk doesn't bleed through mud. You don't need to clean it off or anything. If you use ink, ink will bleed through mud or through mud and paint. The paint's the critical part, and so you don't want to use ink when you're doing that, or you're going to have a problem when you go to painting it and it'll bleed through. Next is when I'm doing corner bead. I've got my metal cutters, tin snips, whatever you want to call them. handy tool for making all your corner bead cuts. And it's not in my pouch, but this tool is called a what I call a Drywall Kick. It has other names as well, but this tool is handy for when hanging, and I just didn't have a chance in another segment to show it, so I'll show you how it works. Basically, you'll put it on the floor and slide it under your sheetrock, step on it with your foot, and you'll be able to push your sheetrock up, whether it be all the way to the ceiling, being an 8-foot piece that needs to go tight against the ceiling, or a 4-foot piece that's going up to the top piece. You'll put your foot on it, press it up, and it creates a really nice tight seam. These are some of the drywall hanging tools that are in my pouch. Hopefully this is helpful to you, and you'll continue to follow us here at drywallinstruction.com.